The movie is called O Hazard Balthazar, which means Balthazar at random or Balthazar by chance. And it's a 1966 French film that was directed by Robert Bresson. Now, this is a very different movie from the one I talked about last week, The Burbs. And a couple of years ago, there was an American friend I had, a journalist, a well-known American journalist, who recently has been accused of being a cuck-servative, though not by me. And I used to send him a gift on his birthday, Christmas. And I sent him as a gift the Criterion version of this movie, O Hazard Balthazar. And I didn't hear back from him about the movie. And I was a little disappointed. And finally I asked him outright if he had seen it, and if so, what he thought of it. He became quite distressed. And he said, well, it was very well made, but when it was over, I thought, why? Why would someone make a movie like this? And he seemed to take my gift as a personal affront. And things not quite the same between us since then. This is a movie that the director, Jean-Luc Godard, said is really the world in an hour and a half. It's the story of a French girl and her donkey. The donkey represents a sort of Christ-like figure in the movie, noble and suffering. The donkey passes through the ownership of many hands, and its life is alternately good or bad, or strange, or even bizarre. And the donkey's story is paralleled by the story of its first owner, the girl Marie. And I'm afraid the movie is not a very happy story for Marie. But one of the things I find so fascinating about this movie is, it's a movie that I learn more from every time I see, and I've seen it, I must have seen it more than 10 times, is that the movie suggests that perhaps stupidity is a sin, that Marie has chosen stupidity, that the terrible things that she suffers in the movie are perhaps the result of her deliberate decisions. That, for instance, she is courted by a young French man who is handsome and kind, and she rejects him for a horrible, horrible young hoodlum who eventually abuses her. And we see throughout the movie this religious theme of the consequences of sin, the sin of pride in particular, when we see what happens to Marie's father based on decisions that he has made. This movie by Bresson is, I suppose, his most highly regarded movie. If you look at the Sight and Sound survey of critics, in most recent one, it is ranked the 16th best ever film. Bresson was a singular filmmaker. He did not use actors. This was not a decision taken to save money, but because he was deeply suspicious of acting. He used ordinary people and cast them in his films. But he didn't direct them as most directors do. He did not attempt to get acting out of them. In fact, he did quite the reverse. He described them as models, and he wanted to purge them of the kind of expression, of actorly expression, such that the movie would not, rise or fall by the level of acting, or that people would not be swayed by acting skills. Bresson also is quite unique in the way that he frames films, typically focusing on hands, doorknobs, setting up deliberate shots in order to make a very strong message. He also was very concerned with the use of sound and thought that sound was as integral to movies as images. This is one of my very most favorite films. It is a movie which is enormously moving, especially the ending, which is absolutely unforgettable. And I have to say that I think that this is a good way to enter Bresson's world. He made a number of films over a period of decades, which are highly regarded. You'll find a number of them on the Sight and Sound list. And some of his other films, Diary of a Country Priest, A Man Escaped, Pickpocket, The Trial of Joan of Arc, Mouchette, Lancelot du Lac, The Devil Probably, and L'Argent. Actually, going back to my American journalist friend, I thought to say to him when he was distressed by the gift that I had forced upon him, that if you thought that this movie was depressing, well, then you should watch Mouchette or The Devil Probably, or his last film, L'Argent, which is absolutely devastating. But, these kind of complaints about films being depressing, I don't think is true. I don't know that a film which expresses the world as it really is can be thought of as depressing. I think that it's fakery and bad art that is depressing. Robert Bresson was a Catholic, and old-time Catholics used to say that this world is a vale of tears, and his movies express this. I mean, that's not the only way to consider the world, but that's the route that he chose, with results which are entirely remarkable. One of the reasons that this movie, Ávasár Balthasar, appeals to me so much is because it features a donkey. And I have to say that I am resolutely unsentimental about animals. I like cats, and I suppose I have a fondness for working animals. And it seems to me only fair that as they serve us, we serve them. But I remember going back to the 1980s, this campaign started in Britain that I noticed through reading the Sunday Telegraph, that they started making a business about the Spanish supposedly mistreating donkeys. Mm-hmm. And they used to run these large ads with large pictures of, shabby, presumably ill-treated donkeys. And I would look at the picture and think, those poor donkeys. But
yeah,
I had an opportunity to actually get some work out of this. In that, about 1986, this donkey business, this idea of evil Johnny Spaniard mistreating donkeys, and the great people of Britain will not stand for it. That this rivalry broke out between two of the biggest tabloid newspapers, The Sun and The Star, over which newspaper was the number one champion of the noble donkey. So I was working for CJOR Radio in Vancouver, and I managed to get a hold of one of the editors from The Star, and he was talking this over with someone, presumably a superior, and explaining, what was going on. And he said, it's someone called Kevin Grace from Vancouver, Canada. And the other guy, says, well, what does he want to talk about? And he says, those bloody donkeys.